Hi, my name is Ashley Zatica, and I'm an elementary education major here at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. This is my final project presentation for Anthropology 242, Native Cultures of Alaska. Throughout this semester, I have been interested in learning about how Alaska Natives learned throughout history. So obviously, I chose to focus my final project on Alaska Native education. Specifically, I focused on Sheldon Jackson's policies and influences on the future. A brief introduction. Alaska Native education is a broad topic that has had many people in charge who influenced what and how children were taught. Originally, I wanted to focus on this whole process, starting with traditional Native education, moving to how the Russians influenced how Alaska Natives were taught, and then again moving to how the Americans influenced the education system in Alaska, and lastly, focusing on how Alaska Natives are taught in the education system today. But this topic was just too broad, so I then narrowed it down to one person. This person was Sheldon Jackson. For the American government, the first person in charge of education in Alaska was Reverend Sheldon Jackson. His presence in education is still felt today in this great state. Because of this, I chose to do my final project on Sheldon Jackson's policies and influence on the future of Alaska Native education. I'm going to start by giving a brief overview about Sheldon Jackson. Sheldon Jackson was born in Mineville, New York in 1834. He lived there with his parents until he graduated high school, where he continued on to college. According to Columbia University Encyclopedia 2012, Jackson graduated from Union College in 1855 and from Princeton Theological Seminary in 1858. His goal throughout his life was to become a Presbyterian missionary, so it was not surprising when he was a Presbyterian missionary all through his adult life. He began his journey west after graduating, where he administered the people throughout the Rocky Mountain area until he came to Alaska, where he became the general agent of education for Alaska. After serving as a missionary for several years, he administered to the people found in southeastern Alaska until he was appointed to this position by the Secretary of the Interior. I also feel that it is important to understand what education was like before Reverend Jackson gained control of the education system in Alaska. Originally, before contact with the Western world, Alaska Native children were taught traditionally at home and not in schools. They learned through observation and experience. This means they learned through watching someone else doing it and then practicing it until they got it right. When the Russians came, most of them were more interested in exploiting Alaska's natural resources than educating its residents. This could be because the Russians considered Alaskan residents as one of its natural resources. One exception to this was Father Viemanov. He spent his life educating Alaskan natives. He built schools and churches for them to learn in. He then learned their native language so that they would not have to learn in Russian. He understood the importance of their language to their culture and their ability to learn. This is a rarity in the history of Alaska Native education. Now it's time to move on to Sheldon Jackson's policies as General Agent of Education for Alaska. He had the job of administering equal education to every student in Alaska, regardless of their race. This was a daunting task because he did not believe in removing children from their natural environment and transferring them to boarding schools. He had to find a way to build schools in all the villages in Alaska so that he could reach every student. With his limited funds, he was able to start a few government schools, but the government money quickly ran out. Because of this, he had to find a way to do it without the government money. To do this, he contracted out areas to various Christian denominations. These denominations were then in charge of educating the children in their assigned areas. For example, the Presbyterians were given charge of Southeast Alaska, and the Methodists were given the area surrounding the Aleutian Islands. The Baptists were given Kodiak and several other islands surrounding the area. He tried to give them the area that their religion was already predominant in. More of Jackson's policies. When he had figured out how schools were going to be built and how the children were going to be administered to, he now had to decide what to teach them. He followed a two-pronged model where there were two main things he wanted the students to learn. The first were the 3 R's because they were the foundation to learning anything else. The 3 R's were reading, writing, and arithmetic, and this followed a similar model found across the United States at this time. The second were industrial skills, such as sewing or carpentry. This was so that after they had finished school, they could join the American workforce. This was the goal of most educators during this time, so it's not surprising that Sheldon Jackson included this in his Alaska Native education policies. And I saved the best for last because to me, the last policy I'm going to discuss was Reverend Jackson's most interesting policy. This policy involves the reindeer that are still found in Alaska today. Jackson decided that the Alaskan natives needed a herding animal to help convert them to the American way of life. Cows and sheep and other common herding animals could not handle the cold, so he went to Siberia and brought back reindeer. He incorporated reindeer into his industrial policies for those living on the Seward Peninsula in hopes that it would change the way they lived. It did, but now it could be argued that these changes were not always for the best. And the reindeer are still found in Alaska today and are still used as a herding animal. So, this has led us to Jackson's influence on the future of Alaska Native education. Even though he was not the only educator to push for the American education of Alaska Native children, he was the first, and his policies had tremendous influence on the future. Because they were different than white Americans, they needed to be made to fit into the mold by speaking English, learning in schools, converting to Christianity, and more changes. These changes have cost the Alaska Natives dearly throughout history. These impacts include the loss of culture and the eventual loss of language for some of these people. Can you imagine someone coming through and converting you to speaking Arabic so that you lost English and the culture that surrounds it? To me, it's impossible to understand. So now it's time to begin to reverse these changes that have happened. And there are already steps being made to reverse them and restore Alaska Native cultures to the way they were before contact and Americanization. These steps include culture camps that are happening across the states in all of the Alaska Native cultures found, and Alaska Native immersion schools that continue to pop up throughout the state. But they are a long way from being finished. The bright side is, though, as long as people stay interested, they will get there. But if people lose interest, then they will be worse off than they were before the Alaska Natives lost their culture. So, in conclusion, Sheldon Jackson's policies are not what any of us would agree with now. But for that time period, he did what he thought was best when educating Alaska Natives. He cared enough about them to try and make their lives better in ways that were popular at the time. But now, we are more culturally responsive as a people and are still trying to right the wrongs that were done to the Alaska Native and American Indians during this time period. They lost their culture, their language, and some of them their homes. So it's going to take a long time for them to have back everything they lost, if they ever do. But to me, the important part is that we are trying. This has been my final project presentation for Anthropology 242. I hope you enjoyed it because I enjoyed learning everything I did. Thank you.